So, this time we are going old school. Really old school. Like playing with Jesus in the sandbox when dirt was still new sort of old school. This is an image of a group of Eldar Striking Scorpions battling a pair of Tyranid Warriors. The image is from way back in 2nd edition, somewhere around 1990 for reference's sake. If you hadn't already noticed, these Tyranid Warriors look really different from the current ones. This is because these are the old school designs for them. As you can see, the Tyranids had a whole different visual aesthetic to them back then. If you're not familiar with the Warhammer 40,000 universe, the Tyranids are an alien race that use a series of subspecies to fill specific battlefield roles. The warriors are roughly comparable to elite troops and lieutenant level commanders. The race itself originates from outside our galaxy and has come here to eat. And pretty much everyone is on the menu. They consume biological material and use it to perpetuate their species. So, pretty much the intergalactic equivalent of a mutant great white shark, but combined with the Tribble's ability to reproduce in numbers proportionate to how much they have eaten. Whether they are running from something else and have come upon the galaxy in a state of starvation, are just following nothing more than some kind of basic instinct to feed, or are some kind of transgalactic immunity response to other life forms. And yes, I have actually heard all of those theories advanced as probable. But whatever their reasons for traveling intergalactic distances and feeding on everything, the Tyranids offered an opportunity for Warhammer 40,000 to really differentiate itself from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Prior to 2nd edition, Warhammer 40,000 was, at the time, largely Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but in space. The Eldar were largely just ports of the Elves. The Imperial Guard was a ported idea based on the peasant armies of the Empire. Space Orcs, well, they were orcs in space. Chaos originated as an evil port of the human armies, which then became an evil port of the human armies, but in space. The Tyranids were the first race introduced into Warhammer 40,000 that weren't based on a port of the Warhammer Fantasy Battle armies. While it is possible to draw comparisons between the Tyranids and the Skavens, the Tyranids are not intergalactic space rats. The Tyranids were something really different at the time. The foundational idea was that they would be an army of alien dinosaurs. And the completely alien nature of the idea offered the model makers a chance to really go out of the norm with their designs, and they certainly did that. Using insect-like bodies but covered in scales, with claws and talons for weapons, but gaping mouths for cannon barrels. One of the earliest big story items involving the Tyranids was about how a Tyranid fleet nearly wiped out the Eldar craft world known as Iandin, and this image was frequently associated with mentions of that story back then. The Eldar utilized specially trained aspect warriors. These were teams of warriors that specialize in a particular form of making war. The Striking Scorpions are one of these groups and are stealth and melee combat experts. Their method of making war relies on their ability to sneak up on an enemy and use deadly short-ranged attacks to eliminate them. One of their signature weapons is a helmet-mounted short-ranged energy weapon known as a Mandy Blaster. That's the blue fire effect going into the mouth of the central Tyranid warrior. This was a challenging piece to color for a couple reasons. Firstly, the image was originally hand-drawn in black and white, and then reproduced using printing presses before I scanned it, 3 decades later. Because of all these different changes in mediums and reproductions, there isn't as much definition to the image as, say, the Gundam Wing manga I've been working on. That lack of definition made it something of a challenge to keep track of what I was actually working on at any given time. There were lots of times during the painting that I had to stop, zoom out, and look at what I was working on, selecting or coloring, just to make sure I was actually working on what I thought I was working on. The boot of the Striking Scorpion being hauled up by the Tyranid Warrior is a good example of this problem. When I was working on the Scorpion, I had a lot of trouble telling if I was still selecting the boot or the body of the warrior behind it. The pixels from the image just kind of all meshed together into shades and tones of gray and black. The 2 Striking Scorpions behind the one that has its helmet ripped off is a good example of this challenge at play. There is very little real definition to the bodies below the necklines, and I had to guesstimate a lot of it. Another challenge was the overall composition of the image. This seems to be something that a lot of large art pieces from that era fell victim to. Look at the Tyranid Warrior's left leg for an example. What is it being stabbed by? Or is it being shot by something? Did it just walk into a stalagmite? I can't tell, and the composition of the rest of the image doesn't really provide any clues to answer it. It seems like the injury to the leg, and whatever is causing the injury, was added later in the drawing process, possibly to cover an error the artist had made previously. I interpret it as being shot by some sort of energy weapon, and colored it thusly. The lower left arm ripping the helmet off the Striking Scorpion gives me much of the same feeling. If you look at it, the arm itself looks like it was added and doesn't work with the rest of the stature of the rest of the warrior or with the direction of attention the warrior is displaying. It's almost as if the image was trying to convey the idea that the arm moves of its own accord, and upon realizing that the Striking Scorpion was within range to be attacked it. Still, this was a fun challenge to address, and I'm mostly pleased with how the image turned out overall. Working on this old school image really brought back a lot of nostalgia from the days when I first entered the tabletop wargaming and modeling hobby.